A little over a year ago, I came across a video titled "The Answer Is Not a Hut in the Woods." Chances are you've seen it too. It circulated quickly, wildly, and confidently, and like many others, I watched it. I liked it. I admired its clarity, its polish, the certainty with which it was argued. Yet, even as I nodded along, something in me resisted. Not loudly, not immediately, just a quiet internal refusal that I couldn't fully articulate at the time. It wasn't anger or contrarianism. It certainly wasn't a dismissal of the creator's work. The video was well made, the argument was intelligent. I simply disagreed. So, this is, in some ways, a rebuttal. Not to the creator as a person, but to the conclusion itself. Because for me, the answer is a hut in the woods. One of the books that most deeply shaped my outlook is Into the Wild by Jon Krakauer. It follows the life and death of Christopher McCandless, along with the stories of others who shared similar impulses. Before reading it, I already knew who McCandless was, or at least who people told me he was. I had absorbed the common verdict. He was a reckless, foolish, naive. Even my grandmother, an avid reader, and the very person who gifted me the book, had described him in this way. To be fair, his death is difficult to defend. He entered the wilderness with limited preparation, little food, and almost an alarming faith in his own resolve. I mean, he has self-confidence at least. Bags of rice are not a survival plan. On the surface, it looks like an arrogant and foolish decision. And I believed that too, until I read the book. What changed wasn't my assessment of his decisions, but my underlying understanding of his motivation. McCandless wasn't chasing death, he was chasing experience. Throughout the book, he is always in motion, always testing himself against the world. In college, he immersed himself in ideas, even contrasting ones, forming a conservative club because of his admiration of Ronald Reagan, while still holding left-leaning views that completed his identity. He worked, traveled, read obsessively, and rejected comfort whenever it threatened to dull his sense of being alive. He wanted, above all, to be human. There's a passage Krakauer includes from Wayne Westerberg, one of McCandless's employers. Westerberg explains that Chris had a habit of thinking deeply about ideas and refusing to move on until he had felt he had resolved them. Westerberg considered this impractical, even foolish. Some questions, he believed, aren't worth the level, but Chris persisted anyway. That detail stayed with me because I recognized it in myself. I don't move easily past questions of right and wrong, meaning and purpose. I couldn't believe that nearly everything exists in a gray space. 99% of life resists clean, moral borders. There are obvious extremes, yes, but most of what we live inside is situational, contextual, unresolved. Knowing that doesn't stop me from trying to understand it anyway. Neither did it stop McCandless. His rejection of materialism wasn't theatrical, it was intentional. He didn't care much for money, possessions, or even the trajectory society expected of him after college. He cared about living deliberately. That, at least, is something I can respect. Henry David Thoreau offers a different but related influence. In Walden and his essay, Thoreau often comes across as sharp, irritable, and unapologetically critical of the world around him. He despised idleness and mocked it, the idea of killing time as though time itself were expendable. To waste life, in his view, is to erode eternity. He was equally unromantic about authority, including age. Thoreau rejected the automatic reverence given to elders simply for living longer, arguing that longevity alone does not produce wisdom. In a society that often equates age with insight, his bluntness feels almost offensive, but it was also honest. Thoreau's withdrawal into nature was not escapism, it was confrontation. He stepped away in order to see more clearly. There was another figure often dragged into these conversations, one I approach carefully and without admiration. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, was a violent criminal whose actions caused real harm and suffering. That fact can and should not be softened. However, separating the man's crimes from the root of his thinking reveals something uncomfortable but instructive. His ideology emerged from an obsessive concern for the environment and a deep fear of industrial and technological domination. His conclusions were monstrous, his methods indefendable, but his diagnosis of unchecked industrialization, technological acceleration, and the psychological consequences of modern life is not entirely divorced from reality. We see today how technology isolates as much as it connects, how constant production erodes mental health, especially among younger generations. Recognizing this does not justify violence, it simply acknowledges that the discomfort he articulates, however wrongly expressed, still exists. And it all circles back to the same place. The hut in the woods. It's not a fantasy of abandonment or superiority. It is not a permanent solution or a moral high ground. It is a symbol, a refusal to let the noise of the world dictate the shape of one's inner life. It represents slowness, intentionality, and the courage to sit with unanswered questions without being crushed by them. McCandless wanted to be human. Thoreau wanted to live deliberately. Even the most distorted thinkers revealed, through their failures, a longing for nature, unmediated by machines in a system that outpaces understanding. So no, the hut in the woods is not an answer the way a policy or a system is an answer. It does not fix the world, but it gives space to remember what it means to exist inside it. And sometimes that's the most honest answer there is.